doesn't happen often, but every now and then we're stunned, right? Caught off guard by a completely unexpected, unanticipated, unplanned for event or piece of news. Wait, what? We incredulously ask. Sometimes it is a time of trauma. Sometimes it is a moment of unexpected joy. Sometimes we don't know what emotion to associate with it. I could not tell you what I had for breakfast yesterday, but I can tell you where I was on Tuesday morning, September 11th of 2001. I know that I was at home with my 4-month-old daughter, Hannah. Mark was at work in Harrisburg. I was folding laundry, mountains and mountains of laundry. That's what it felt like with a new baby. How or why do you fold a onesie, or a baby sock, or a teeny tiny washcloth? I was watching the Today Show, which I didn't normally even do, but for some reason that morning I must have decided that I wanted some company. Katie Couric and Matt Lauer cut into whatever it was they were talking about and shared a report that a plane had hit one of the World Trade Center towers. And then there was another. And there seemed to be grave concern. It appears that everyone knew right away that something horrific was happening, but that wasn't my experience, at least not initially. I just felt stunned. Not a something big is happening here sort of way, because to be honest, I didn't feel that. I couldn't tell. I didn't know. I really didn't feel much of anything at first. It made no sense. I had no context for what was happening. Maybe it's because I had never been to New York City. Maybe it's because the soaring heights of the World Trade Center seemed to have little to do with my mountain of laundry. Maybe it's because I was in the first month of not doing the job of teaching elementary school that I always thought would be my life's calling, only to discover that it was not. Maybe it's because I was home alone with a 4-month-old infant and I was only 24, which is odd because I'm still only 29. And my world was very, very small. Maybe it's because there was no social media and no one was texting me because we didn't have cell phones. But for whatever the reason, even as I watched the events play out as they did, the Pentagon, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the crumbling towers, the realization of the tremendous loss of life, the travel and political implications to follow. In my memory, it is all very slow motion, and it seems like it took me a very long time to realize the gravity of what was happening. And I'm not saying that was the best or even necessarily a shared response. I'm just saying I can understand how really big, unexpected things can render one speechless. The Mark 16 resurrection narrative leans into our human uncertainty. The women are approaching the tomb, completely expecting to see it closed up. In fact, the last thing that happens right before they realize that something different has happened is they ask, "Who's going to roll the stone away from the entrance for us?" And I'm not sure why they didn't think of that before they started walking, but be that as it may, Mark's version tells us that the question is non-verbally answered by the fact that the stone has already been moved away. They enter the tomb, they see a young man dressed in a white robe just sitting there, hanging out, telling them not to panic, right after they begin to panic. "You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth. He has been raised. He is not here. Go, tell the others that he's going on to Galilee, and you will see him there." And what do the women do? They are alarmed. They flee, and they were afraid and didn't tell anyone what they saw. That's the resurrection story. Or is it? Jesus was resurrected and the women didn't tell anybody? Well, that's unsettling, at least. Maybe makes us a little uncomfortable to consider. In fact, it's quite likely that the later verses, which have special markings in almost every Bible that I've ever looked at were added later, and it is likely that this was the original ending of the Gospel of Mark, but to smooth it out, to make it a bit more palatable, some additional endings have been added over time. But I think that the women's response, as Mark records it, is not inappropriate. To be honest, I think it's a completely normal response and to be expected. In fact, perhaps it's the best response. This shocking God thing has just happened, and they are the first to witness it. Wait, what is happening? But I thought he was dead. We were just coming to care for the body. The women have been bound by an understanding of Jesus as human, as walking, as talking in a body, and they are appropriately unprepared for a new, unbound understanding of their teacher, their rabbi. They do not have a context for what is coming next. And in their silence, perhaps they are making space for God's presence to be revealed. Perhaps God's voice is best heard when ours is not. As Gail O'Day writes, what adequate words can the women speak in those first few moments as they leave the tomb that would not trivialize the moment, that would not make the empty tomb into a story about what they have seen, instead of being a moment about what God has done? The women's restraint and Mark's parallel restraint in recounting the Easter story combine to allow a moment of holy awe for the reader of the gospel. In the wake of an unexpected movement of the Spirit, something more than words that is holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y, and holy, H-O-L-Y, appropriate. Silence. Taking a minute. Allowing God to speak that which is beyond human understanding. We are constantly reading the scriptures through the lens of the end of the story that we know and have been told. But I wonder if we can try, just for a moment, with our minds and our hearts and our body and our soul, to enter the story as it would have been experienced by those women. He is not here. He has been raised. And then, go back to the beginning. Go back to the beginning of Mark, which immediately reminds us in Mark 1:1 that this is the beginning of the good news about Jesus Christ, God's Son. And we read it again, and we listen to it again, and we witness the resurrection over and over again in the scripture story, in song, in buds preparing to burst on otherwise bare branches, in washing feet, in a sunrise, in a walk in the woods, in the birth of a new baby, in stories of love and new life that emerge from the ashes, in the hope that we carry out of this place, this morning, this church, into the world. I really love flowers and plants. Outside, inside, yes. I'm not very good at keeping them alive, however, but I'm trying. And I want to show you one of them. And I have a picture for those who can't see very well. This little friend is called Dracaena marginata. I'm looking at my daughter who knows plants. Also known as dragon tree. This might be the most unattractive little dragon tree you ever did see. Here's the description of this plant from my studious Google search. It's easy to care for, drought tolerant, and nearly indestructible. It's had a bit of a challenging life. This was part of an assortment of houseplants that I was gifted for my ordination. which was the week before COVID began. So this plant has been through COVID. Eventually, it was transplanted into a beautiful pot, white with blue and dark red designs, but the pot got knocked off a shelf and broke, and so it was moved to this less decorative home. And then I have mentioned to you that we have cats. Fern, Phoebe, and Freya. Fern finds these leaves to be particularly delicious, as you can see. This plant normally, just so you know, is like draping. It used to look like that. And in order to save the plant from the cat, it was then shoved up on the mantle above the wood stove in our kitchen, which is a nice, dry, heated environment. And that's where it's baked over the last several weeks. And I am sorry to say that very little that we have done has helped this plant along. But we noticed at the very tippy top, there are new leaves sprouting. I have another photo that really actually shows how terrible the other leaves look, but it's supposed to show the beautiful new leaves sprouting in the center. New shoots are springing out of the top, shooting towards the sky, reaching out to reform the plant anew. I'm not sure what will happen. Well, I do know that one thing that will happen is this plant is now going to live in my office here at the church, which I don't know actually what that means for the plant. I will do my best. Perhaps it will be more protected there. Maybe next Easter, its draping leaves will have returned. No words I say are going to keep this plant alive. With silence and appropriate watering and lighting, I'm hopeful that it will grow and become more than it is right now. As you consider the women's experience at the tomb, the new life that is promised from life that appears to not be doing so well, I invite you to practice resurrection, practice new beginnings, practice confronting, confounding, and incomprehensible experiences with curiosity. Practice openness, practice renewal, practice rest, practice planting and growth, practice speaking without words, practice leaving space for God, practice going back to the beginning, practice resurrection. For Christ is risen. He is risen indeed.